We'll start this anthropological thought today. So chapter 6. Considered as one of the difficult topics, but not very difficult because we kept on quoting this ideas in multiple instances, starting from chapter 2.1. So I don't believe it should be actually difficult for you. So please pay proper attention. Today I'll try to give one framework to overview of anthropological thought. Okay, one framework to overview. First I'll start with overview by touching upon the important ideas. First things first, they call it anthropological thought or they call it anthropological theories. So what are these theories revolving around? What are they actually trying to study? In this entire chapter, obviously what would an anthropologist study? About culture and society. So all these theories look at the same thing called as culture. But each of them look at through their own lens. Okay, it's all about changing the color of the lens. Okay, one will see it through evolutionary lens, other would see it through diffusionary lens, somebody else would come and see it through functionalism lens, somebody would come and see it through, let's say, structural functionalist lens, somebody would come and see it through, let's say, symbolic anthropology lens. These are all different ways of looking at more or less the same phenomenon called as culture and society. This is something very basic or fundamental which most of the students miss out. Are you getting my point? First we should know what are we doing. What actually we are doing is, essentially we are trying to study the same phenomenon called as culture or society. But we are studying the same phenomenon called as culture or society through different perspectives. These are all different thinkers and they have come up with their own methodologies or their own ways of studying something called as culture or society. So obviously, what is another important thing we should expect from this discussion? One, each of them have their own way of discussing it. Other thing, let's say 5 guys are there, A guy, B guy, C, D, E. All these are different thinkers, right? Anthropological thinkers. If this guy would say, my approach is correct, what would this guy say? No, your approach is incomplete, insufficient, inaccurate. My approach is the most advanced way. Later somebody else would come and say, this is incorrect, this is insufficient, this is inaccurate, mine is the most advanced. Later somebody else would come, no, all the three, you have many mistakes, mine is the most appropriate. So generally what you can expect from the discussions of anthropological thought is this. Because if somebody wants to substantiate that my way of looking at something is correct, I have to discredit somebody, isn't it? Otherwise people would question, there is already one way of studying it, then what is so great in you? Never, like sometimes they also would say, yes, I got inspired from him, I got inspired from him, I got inspired from him. They may acknowledge, but each one of them, this is what you will observe if you read any textbook, largely what you will observe is only this. studying the same thing called as culture or society through different lens or different perspectives. And obviously, as the studies evolve, one who came later after somebody else trying to discredit the past work, trying to claim that their way or their methodology is most advanced, and trying to expose the inconsistencies or inaccuracies or insufficiencies in the previous format. So that's what the reason why this might sound very theoretical for you when I'm talking this to you, because the moment you open some of the standard textbooks, the way the content overload or the content is dumped, you may get lost, forgetting the original purpose of introduction of anthropological thought into the syllabus. Let's say if you open Upadhyay Pandey, he writes so much about each one of these subtopics within this. By the time you reach the end of the chapter, you would literally get lost. And this is the reason why students find this topic, anthropological thought, difficult. So don't lose the sight of the original intent of this topic. There might be many subtopics, but seldom they are kind of picking up these ideas. They are largely confining to the original intent or original purpose of introduction of this topic. So again I am saying, what is examiner expecting? Does this guy know the fundamentals of each of this approach to study culture or society? Does this guy know how somebody proposing a original idea tried to discredit the previous ideas or tried to make correction in the previous ideas? Most of the students, while writing answer, they are not writing this. I'll tell this. Like mains level students, when we give questions on functionalism of Malinowski, structural functionalism, they would write 1.5 page about Kula ring system. You know why they would do such a mistake? They would do such a mistake because in Upadhyay Pandey he speaks so much about Kula ring system. They think functionalism topic is Kula ring system. Kula ring system is just one what do you call a case study he has taken up to better explain the idea of functionalism. That's not the only thing he has studied. So don't go by the optics, don't go by the way one topic is over highlighted in any book. Likewise, so you confine yourself to classroom discussions, image based PDFs which we provide, text based PDF we provide, because when you are strong with the fundamentals, even if he tries to experiment, tries to go slightly out of the way and ask the questions, with the knowledge of fundamentals you can easily and confidently approach other areas also, right? Okay, without taking much time, but the discussion which I have done over the last 10 minutes is worth deserving, because I have seen students committing the mistake and losing sight of the original intent or original purpose. Anything, if you are studying any subtopic within a broader topic, think, why is it written under structural functionalism? Why is it written under symbolic anthropology? Like 2 days ago, one student has come. This guy is from Bits Pilani and he has given I think 2 mains he has given. And when I ask him the rituals of liminality, he is not able to discuss it in the context of symbolic anthropology, not able to link it to structure, anti-structure. He is just explaining rites of passage. Explaining just rites of passage would not make any sense. That does not require any analytical depth, right? Linking it to structure, anti-structure, and how it is a challenge to existing social structure, and every societies have provided for this. This is the analytical depth. Okay, so never read anything without analytical depth. Don't read things superficially. Okay, and if you have doubts, we are always available. Just reach out to us. And on this note, first I'll start with these guys, evolutionary anthropologists. So as the name itself is suggestive, right? Evolutionary anthropologist. So what is their obsession? How something took its origin. They also are interested in explaining how something took its origin and how something has evolved over the time, isn't it? How something has taken its origin and how something has evolved over the time. Observe the term over the time. How something has evolved over the time. That is what interests evolutionary anthropologists. In our syllabus, they have largely given. They have expected us to study three names. One is very popular. Yes, we have come across his name multiple times from chapter 2.1, isn't it? What is the first thing we studied in depth and detail about him? Remember? His definition of culture. I think we have spent around 2 classes just discussing his definition of culture, isn't it? All those aspects, the way he defined culture. E.V. Tyler is one person, evolutionary anthropologist. Then of course, another person given in our syllabus, James Fraser. Did I mention his name in previously? James Fraser. Yes, please. In what context? James Fraser, in what context we mention his name? Huh? Magic, science and religion distinguished, isn't it? I told even Malinowski also has done studies on magic, religion and science. But what is the name of that popular book? The Golden Bough. Don't forget, these are all very, very important. That's why I told, I have already discussed a lot of anthropological thought for you. In his book Golden Bough, he discussed magic, science and religion. Magic evolved into religion, evolved into science. This is what we discussed in the past. Same evolutionary approach only. Then another celebrity evolutionary anthropologist whose name we have mentioned multiple times. In which chapter? We spoke a lot about him. Kinship. I told, right? Every subheading or heading in the chapter kinship is inspired from him. That's why I suggest you, keep on suggesting you to revise things as and when they are taught. Who invented kinship terminologies? L.H. Morgan. Kinship terminologies studied for the first time by whom? L.H. Morgan. Who inspired descent theory? L.H. Morgan. L.H. Morgan inspired descent theory. Already in kinship topic, we came across his name many a times. Isn't it? L.H. Morgan name came multiple times in the kinship topic. Okay. So, there also, if you guys remember, I told very, very important point. First form of kinship system according to L.H. Morgan is classificatory kinship system. You remember? Later it evolved into descriptive kinship system. According to him, first form of kinship system is, that's why at least tomorrow class you guys quickly revise chapter 3, 4, 5 and come. Otherwise, you are keeping your faces as if nothing has been taught previously. No, it's not at all acceptable. Quickly see 3, 4, 5 once, flip through the pages and sit in the class. This is not correct. This is not appropriate. Everything I can't teach multiple times, right? Then you should give me that confidence that I can go a little fast. That confidence is not at all coming from you. So he believed that earliest form of kinship system is classificatory kinship system. Later this has evolved into descriptive kinship system. If you observe, I am using the same term again and again and again. Evolved into. So evolutionary anthropologists are very much interested in explaining everything in an evolutionary perspective. Okay. So this is introduction of evolutionary anthropology. This will take me to Next, two components given in the syllabus. One they have given as historical particularism. Historical particularism. Then they have given diffusionism. Then they have given diffusionism. Actually, both of them would fall under an idea called as historicism. I'll mention what is historicism in the regular session. But historicism includes historical particularism and diffusionism. Historical particularism and diffusionism. Now, historical particularism. So, Franz Boas, father of historical particularism, and diffusionism in our syllabus. They have given three schools. One, British School of diffusionism. Then German-Austrian School of diffusionism. Then what else they have given in the syllabus? American School of diffusionism. These three they have given in the syllabus. In a way, Franz Boas is overtly critical of both evolutionary scholars and diffusionist scholars. You will understand in a while why he is overtly critical of both evolutionary scholars and diffusionist scholars. Before that, to explain, yes, diffusionism. How diffusionism looks at the phenomenon called as culture? Very simple. Diffusionism, it is inspired from an English word, diffusion. Diffusion means what? Diffusion means nothing but spread. Diffusion means nothing but spread. Spread, what does it mean? Simple. Diffusionism means that there are some places, and it is in these places all the cultural traits have got originated. There are few places, and at these few places cultural traits have got originated, and from these places they have diffused to different parts of the world, and it took time for it to diffuse to different parts of the world. That is what diffusionist scholars primarily talk about. If you extend the logic little bit, diffusionist scholars are indirectly saying that not all humans are capable of thinking on their own, or not all humans are innovative. Not all humans are capable of thinking on their own. There are only few places where the original ideas are being born, and from these few places where the original ideas are being born, ideas or cultural traits get diffused to different parts of the world, and it would take time for these ideas to get diffused to different parts of the world. Does this resemble anything which is happening in the modern days? Similar to the idea of globalization, right? This is very similar to the idea of globalization, very similar to the idea of globalization, but we will touch upon it in the regular session. So tell me, what is the diffusionist scholar most interested in? Diffusionist scholar is most interested in understanding the spread of a cultural trait from one particular region to different regions, isn't it? Now, coming to Franz Boas' first reason why Franz Boas is critical of evolutionary and diffusionist scholars is he called them, you guys are ethnocentric. You guys are ethnocentric. Ethnocentric means there are two reasons why he called them ethnocentric. When these guys, evolutionary anthropologists and diffusion anthropologists, they explained about cultural phenomenon, they said, let's say it is like this. All forms of marriages start with promiscuity and they end with monogamy. They end with monogamy. Or let's say religions end with monotheism. See, in this line of evolution, what this evolutionary anthropologists have done is they have put all the cultural traits of Europe at the top. What they did? They said cultural traits have evolved over the time, and while explaining this, they have said all the European cultural traits they have put at the top, and rest of the cultural traits of the world they have put in lower levels in the course of human cultural evolution. In the course of human cultural evolution, they have put it at lower level. Obviously, this is protested and this is criticized by Franz Boas as being ethnocentric. Ethnocentric means you are obsessed about your own ethnic group as superior. That is one major criticism. And even these guys have committed the same mistake, diffusionism. You know what they said? According to them, most of the cultures have taken origin at very few places. And that few places, you know what they have highlighted? That few places, according to them, are European places or the places from West Asia. That again has a ethnocentric bias. So Franz Boas have vehemently criticized these two schools, evolutionary school and diffusionism school, and he proposed an idea of particularism. Historical particularism means, let's say we have to study any culture. If we have to study any culture, study it. Okay, it is a separate page. If we want to study any culture, study their particular history. Not just particular history. Study their particular environment. Know about their geography. Know about their history. So he has emphasized on the particular or unique factors or the unique determinants, and this unique determinants, according to Franz Boas, would have contributed to the emergence of cultures. We should not, I just add this point also. Franz Boas also says this. These two previous scholars, evolutionary anthropologists and diffusion anthropologists, so what they have done is They have adapted diachronic studies. They have adopted diachronic studies. They have adopted a comparative approach. Diachronic studies, what they have done is a comparative approach. Diachronic studies, comparative approach. What they have done is largely comparisons. Isn't it? Look here. Comparison. Comparing European culture to some other culture, saying that European culture is superior. Comparison. Here saying that even diffusionist scholars, this is the center of all the cultural traits from here. So it's a lot of comparisons, especially evolutionary school, largely comparisons, and both these schools gave excessive emphasis on diachronic studies. In fact, diachronic means, what is diachronic, synchronic? Diachronic studies means across the time, isn't it? I told multiple times in the class. Diachronic studies means across the time. Across the time. Synchronic studies means at that particular time. So these studies are largely diachronic studies. In fact, historical particularism school also is a diachronic studies. But most importantly, particularism is against the idea of comparison. And he has inspired generations of scholars. He also added one more thing. Even the psychology or the thinking of the people would determine particular culture. And observe this point, very, very important. This has inspired many schools of thought. Let's say, for instance, in our own syllabus, as part of anthropological thought, we have cultural ecology. Cultural ecology, we study them along with neo-evolutionism. And the cultural ecology got inspired from Franz Boas' studies that it is the environment has a significant role to play to determine cultural trait. It's a very powerful idea he has seeded, which inspired altogether separate schools. What did he say? Environment will determine cultural traits. It's a very powerful idea which inspired formation of separate schools altogether. People picked these ideas and they developed separate schools of study. Similarly, he said, psychology or thinking of the people can determine culture. This in turn inspired other schools like culture personality school or psychological anthropology, which it is called in the later dates. Like this, this is why Franz Boas, he's an American, he's considered as a pioneer. He's considered as a pioneer in many ways. One, he has criticized the ethnocentric views of these guys. And by criticizing these ethnocentric views, what is the concept he tried to propose? He tried to propose the concept of cultural relativism. Who proposed the concept of cultural relativism? Franz Boas, right? Franz Boas proposed the concept of cultural relativism. Okay, you guys take a test this week. Chapter 3, Chapter 4, Chapter 5, weekend. Only 3-4 students have written tests from Chapter 2.1 to 2.5. That's why you're all giving dumb answers in the classes. Okay, at least now take test seriously. This weekend write Chapter 3, Chapter 4, Chapter 5. Don't take it lightly. Come well prepared and take the test. If your time permits, also try to write Chapter 2.1 to 2.5, all of you. Okay, yes. So cultural relativism concept is proposed by Franz Boas by criticizing ethnocentrism. So this is the first block about which we will be studying as part of anthropological thought, this evolutionary scholars, diffusionary scholars, historical particularism. So we also call these two, especially the evolutionism, diffusionism, we call them classical anthropologists in certain ways. We will explain it in another context, but for time being, when these kind of studies are happening, simultaneously, little later, people felt this obsession with diachronic studies, this obsession with diachronic studies is not giving us a proper picture or is not giving us a good clarity to study about contemporary cultures or contemporary societies. People felt so. There is a reason, possible reason for this bias. E.B. Taylor is originally an archaeologist also. And some of these diffusionary scholars, they are also archaeologists. So they have shown more interest. What does an archaeologist do? Isn't it? Study prehistorical cultures, material facts, artifacts. That is what an archaeologist does, isn't it? We discussed in chapter 1.8. So when archaeologists are interested in this, obviously that impact would have been on this E.B. Taylor and diffusionist scholars. So they are more obsessed about studying the past and studying how things have evolved over time or how things have diffused over time. So this largely this has led to, what do you call, a kind of incomplete understanding of the cultures or societies. So with this as the primary criticism, there is a sudden shift in anthropology or anthropological thought from diachronic studies to synchronic studies. 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 There is this transition from so synchronic studies means study of that particular at that particular time, and the beginnings of this synchronic studies and two popular schools of synchronic studies, the functionalist school in some books they classify it like this: functionalist schools, biocultural functionalism, structural functionalism. Structural functionalism, you already know. Who is the pioneer of structural functionalist scholar? R.C. Brown. Of course, Emile Durkheim also, but in our syllabus, Emile Durkheim is not given, though we quote him, use his name generously. But yes, in our syllabus, they have given R.C. Brown. There is a reason why they call. Then who is the biocultural I did not use this term biocultural functionalism in the past, but yes, Malinowski is considered as a biocultural functionalist. In the regular session, I'll explain you why he is called as a biocultural functionalist, but simply put, he is a functionalist scholar. But you already know what does a functionalist scholar talks about. What does a functionalist scholar talks about? Functionalist scholar is more interested in understanding functions. There are different social institutions and he is interested in studying the functions of various social institutions, functions of various cultural traits, likewise. But what is the area of interest for a structural functionalist scholar? This you already know. Yes, structural functionalist scholar believe that everything, there is something called a social structure. There are social institutions, there are social actors, and there is a constant interaction between social actors and social institutions, and the nature of interactions, we call them social processes, and nature of interactions characterized by competition, collaboration, coordination, conflict. I have told this multiple times, and overall the whole point is to maintain the social structure. Of course, social structure means maintenance of social order, social harmony, social equilibrium, and social stability is the idea. This has been quoted multiple times in the classes. So this is what a structural functionalist scholar would be interested in. Structural functionalist scholar would be, what is the obsession of a structural functionalist scholar? Maintenance of social structure. Maintenance of social structure. Whereas, and if you carefully observe this functionalist school, is it not a synchronic study? It is a synchronic study, right? It is a synchronic study. It does not give much weightage to understanding the history. Is there any emphasis on history? Not much. Just study the present societies, study the present culture, study the present societies. That would suffice. Okay. So, did you observe the transition, how it happened? Evolutionary school, diffusionism school, historical particularism school. Later came this functionalist approach, which is a synchronic study, very, very important, synchronic study. And the synchronic study, it has biocultural functionalism and structural functionalism. And structural functionalism talking about maintenance of social structure, biocultural functionalism talking about understanding the functionality of or functional importance of various cultural traits or social institutions. Now, parallelly, more or less parallel to these guys, have come another school in America. Very, very important. These concepts you should have clearly in your mind. This school largely developed in British. Functionalism school is developed largely by British anthropologists, both structural functionalism and biocultural functionalism, inspired by British school or largely related to British school. Okay, more or less parallelly, another group of anthropologists, these are the disciples of Boas. So we also loosely use the term called as Boasians for them. Boasians means these are all the disciples of Frank Boas. Sorry? Frank Boas, originally not American, but considered as an American anthropologist because he settled in America. So he is considered as an American anthropologist. Okay. So Frank Boas inspired a group of students, especially the ones like Ruth. Yeah, what's her name? Ruth Benedict. Then who else are the culture personality school? Margaret Mead. And these guys, especially these two women, they are very interested in establishing the link between human mind and culture. They are very interested in establishing link between human mind and culture. To be more precise, they did not, like cognitive anthropologists, they did not go into understand how human mind thinks and all, but to be more precise, personality and its impact on culture, and also how culture can determine personality. These are the things they are interested in. We will talk about them more in detail later. Every individual has a personality, or a group of individuals in a particular culture have a personality. How this would determine cultural traits, or how cultural traits would determine personality of individuals in the culture. Very simple, right? Think carefully. There are a group of individuals in a society, each of them have their personalities. How personality of group of these people will determine the culture. Also, they are also interested in how culture can determine the personalities of the individuals who are there as part of that particular culture. This is what largely they try to study and refine. In this process, this so-called culture personality school, this culture personality school, they also are inspired by another scholar whose name I have already mentioned in a couple of contexts, Sigmund Freud. In which context I previously mentioned his name? By discussing incest taboo, and by also discussing psychological approach to the study of religion, isn't it? Two contexts I mentioned his name. One while studying incest taboo, other while studying the topic of psychological approach to the study of religion. They are also inspired by Sigmund Freud. They are also inspired by Franz Boas, and in this process they have come up with this culture personality school. And of course, inspired by this Ruth Benedict Margaret Mead, there are other people like Ralph Linton, Abraham Cardino, Cora Dubois. They have not deviated much from what the original proponents of the concept have come up with, but only thing is that they have refined it. They have refined the culture personality school. These guys, they have refined the culture personality school. You got my point? They have refined the culture personality school. They did not majorly, little bit of corrections they have done. They have improvised the methodologies of study, and they have refined their predecessors. Who are they? Ralph Linton, Abraham Cordiner, Cora Dubois. When I take regular session, I'll call them, these three scholars, we call them as personality mediation approach. There is a reason why I am mentioning this term personality mediation approach in the present session itself. Because in my last class, I have explained primary institutions, impact on basic personality, determining secondary institutions. You remember? Whose name I quoted there? Abraham Cardiner. What did I call him? Neo-Freudian scholar. Remember? Neo-Freudian scholar. I called him Neo-Freudian scholar. Hope you guys remember. So, personality mediation approach means there will be a primary institutions. Primary institutions will determine the basic personality. Basic personality in turn will determine the secondary institutions. So this is how, yes, I think this much of information is sufficient for you for the introductory session. Culture Personality School, which got inspired from Franz Boas and also has taken inspiration from Sigmund Freud. Okay, and when these developments are happening more or less parallelly, some people, because of the obsession of this structural functionalist, the functionalist scholars to discredit evolutionary scholars, another school has started, and this another school, this has developed largely in America. These group of scholars, we call them Neo-Evolutionary School. And very closely related to this Neo-Evolutionary School is another school called as Cultural Materialism School. You know what they have tried to do? They again brought back history. This Neo-Evolutionary schools and the cultural material schools, they again brought back history. Especially Neo-Evolutionism school, they have faulted the obsession with studying the present. If you ignore history, you will miss out on many things. So let's not do this mistake. So they again, if you remember, I said, like, while discussing Neo-Darwinism, Neo-Lamarckism, anything neo means what? They try to correct the mistakes in the original theory and they'll try to come up with a more advanced theory. This is what I said. It is neo-Darwinism, it is neo-Lamarckism, it is neo. Wherever they use the term neo means what? They'll accept that there are some mistakes in the previous methodology, in the previous school, but they still believe in its potential. They will do some course correction in it and they'll again come up with a new proposals and they'll call it as neo. That is the constant template. Like this, there are some people like, Gordon Childy, Leslie White, Gordon Childy, Leslie White, and who's that guy? Julian Stewart. Did I mention his name anywhere previously? Gordon Childy? Anyone? Gordon Childy. Ajay? Who is Gordon Childy? Huh? Leslie White I mentioned. Where? Where did I mention Leslie White? Huh? Okay, academic anthropology, Leslie White I mentioned. I agree with you. But Gordon Childy also I mentioned. Where? Oasis theory. Isn't it? When I discussed Neolithic period and when I discussed Oasis theory, factors that led to origination of domestication of plants and animals. In Oasis theory, I mentioned, he's also the one who called the Neolithic age of revolution. Age of revolution, isn't it? Don't forget anything. Anything that is taught in the class is important and you should try to understand. Everything is linked. If you see their names separately, you would think, I have to remember so many names. No, there are not actually many names. Same names get, look, Leslie White, we spoke about him while talking about substantivism, neo-substantivism. In many contexts, we bring Leslie White also. So Leslie White, Julian Stewart, Gordon Childy, all these are neo-evolutionary school. They did not, it's not a major change or major shift in the course of study like structural functionalism from evolutionary diffusionism to structural functionalism, but they said this obsession to discredit history is not correct. History is still relevant, and they also further refined the archaeological techniques, and by doing all these things, they still believed in the potential of the idea of evolutionary anthropologists. They said, yes, if you have to study culture, you should understand, you should study it in a historical perspective. Don't ignore history, don't ignore archaeology. Cultural materialism school, somewhat related to the neo-evolutionism school only. For them again, you already know this guy. It's not that you are not aware of cultural materialism school. His name, the moment I write, it will strike you. Marvin Harris. Where did I bring his name previously? While discussing chapter 2.1, did I bring his name? Yes. While discussing culture is adaptive, I discussed one idea for almost 20-25 minutes in the class. Culture is adaptive. When I discussed about the idea culture is adaptive, I brought his name Marvin Harris. And what did I tell when I discussed this culture is adaptive of Marvin Harris? What did I tell? I told you that, remember this image? What are the terms I have used? Infrastructure, structure and superstructure. Remember this? Diagram, same diagram. Infrastructure, structure and superstructure. So for this guy, what is very, very important? Yes, very good. For this guy, the techno-economic base, that is the term I have used. Techno-economic base. What is most important for them? techno-economic base is very, very important for a cultural materialist. Which means infrastructure will determine structure, infrastructure will determine superstructure. This is what I told when we discussed about him. For him, everything boils down to techno-economic base. Our religion, our political organization, our economic organization, isn't it? Did you observe how much interlinkage there is between chapter 2.1 to chapter 6? Everything is interrelated. Everything is interrelated. Try to understand that interlinkages. So he said culture is adaptive, which means culture adapts, and one important defining factor for him is it is the techno-economic base. Human beings' ability to meddle with environment using the techno-economic base, meddle with or to manipulate the environment using the techno-economic base will determine the structure and superstructure. The reason why I did not use the term environment here is I want to use it here, then bring it back to here. Even the neo-evolutionary scholars have given a lot of importance to environment in determining culture. Very, very important point. Neo-evolutionary scholars have given a significant importance to highlighting the fact that environment plays a significant role in determining the culture. You should never forget that point. They are obsessed in highlighting the idea that environment will determine the culture. Environment will determine the culture. Environment will determine the culture. Simple, right? Environmental determinism is the term we will use in the regular class. Environment will determine the culture. Marvin Harris said, yes, it is the ability to manipulate the environment using the techno-economic base will determine other cultural traits like structure and superstructure. So there is a lot of overlap or similarity between neo-evolutionary school and cultural materialist school. For cultural materialist school, there is a techno-economic base. The techno-economic base will determine the structure and superstructure. Marvin Harris says that let us not say blindly that environment will determine the culture. Of course, environment will determine the culture, but humans have technology. Humans have invented technology. Humans have their own subsistence methodology. With this, they know how to manipulate the environment. This techno-economic base called as infrastructure will determine the structure and superstructure. Remember the example Sembaga, pig fees we have given, and another example I have discussed, cow. Why cow is sacred in India. These two examples I have discussed. Okay, go back to that PDF and see it again. Right. So, did you observe that? So, this is how the transition is gradual. This is also a kind of transition. And when all these things are happening, out of the blue, somebody has come and somebody has created, lot of commotion in the academic circle, and he has become extremely popular in a very short span of time. So, who is that guy? Levi-Strauss. 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 You know this guy, Levi-Strauss. Who is he? Levi-Strauss. He's a structuralist scholar. He's a structuralist scholar. I told you many times, don't get confused. Structuralism means here he is not much about the social structure. What structure he is talking about it is? What structure? Mental structure. He is more interested in understanding mental structure. And he believes that, what does he believe that? Of course, there are universal mental structures. There are universal mental structures, means this again is very similar to, I did not mention this idea. Evolutionary scholar says this, psychic unity of mankind. Psychic unity of mankind. Psychic unity of mankind. What does it mean? Very simple. All humans all over the world think alike. Psychic unity of mankind. All humans all over the world think alike. It is his mental structure idea is very similar to that. All humans all over the world think alike. There is a universal mental structure. And what is that thinking alike is nothing but principle of, very good, principle of binary opposition. Principle of binary opposition. Principle of binary opposition, and one among the binary is valued more. One among the binary is valued more. We will discuss more about it again in the structuralism. In a binary, if there is X and Y, generally X is valued more by all the societies. So here what we have to understand is not more than this discussion in the present class. This guy Levi-Strauss is more interested in explaining the origins. For him, he is more interested in explaining the origins. Why kinship has taken its origin, why marriage system has taken its origin, why mythologies have taken its origin. For him, everything is about origins, origins, origins. And how he tries to explain the origins, he tries to explain the origins through mental structures. Isn't it? If I go and if I try to understand the mental structures of people, then it will help me to understand the origins of kinship, origins of mythology, origins of various social institutions, You got my point? So this is primarily the interest of Levi-Strauss. The reason why he has become extremely popular is nobody before him tried to do this systematic understanding of the origins of it. People spoke more about evolution. They did not talk much about origins. Even evolutionary scholars obsessed more about evolution. Did not talk much about origins of anything. But yes, structuralist Levi-Strauss spoke about origins. He tried to explain. Remember that. That is what we discussed in the descent theory, right? Descent theory, nature, culture. Isn't it? Nature is being selfish. Culture is being selfless. So gifting of the women is the highest form of selflessness. So when gifting of women started, something called as kinship started. That is according to him origin of kinship. What is origin of marriage for him? Nature is incest, culture is incest, taboo. So incest taboo is the beginnings of marriage and family, or the origin of marriage and family for Levi-Strauss. So everything he explains, he tries to explain in a conceptual manner by using his concept called as binary opposites. What are the binary opposites he used the most? Nature, culture. Nature and culture are the binary opposites he used the most. Right. So when structuralism is happening, there is another guy called as Edmund Leech. Edmund Leech. You know what he has done? Edmund Leech comes little later. Edmund Leech got inspired from one Levi-Strauss, and Edmund Leech is a structuralist also. He got inspired from Levi-Strauss, and Edmund Leech took the idea of binary opposites from Levi-Strauss. Edmund Leech took the idea of binary opposites from Levi-Strauss. Edmund Leech also is a structural functionalist. But he's a different type of structural functionalist. What is this? He's a different type of structural functionalist. He said, see, I agree that there is maintenance of social structure, that is all happening, but he says to explain the maintenance of social structure, we have to see it through the conflict. Social structure is not as harmonious as you are all talking. It's not that harmonious as you are all highlighting about. There is a lot of conflict constantly happening in the society, and this conflict is contributing to a continuous change in the social structure. Though there is a change in the social structure, still the social structure is being maintained. So he is more interested in explaining the changes in the social structure. Whereas the structural functionalist scholar, original structural functionalist scholar, they are more interested in explaining the stability, harmony, order, equilibrium. He is more interested in explaining there are constantly changes occurring in the social structure, and what is stimulating the changes in the social structure is various conflicts which are happening in the society. These conflicts will often change the social structure from a form A to form B. This, it's not possible to explain in the introductory session, but intelligently Edmund Leech has combined the concepts of both structuralism and structural functionalism and comes up with his own understanding and his own theory to explain certain phenomenon happening in the society. Okay, I know it's a little difficult to understand in the introductory session because I have to explain it with example for you to really understand what is the intention of Edmund Leech. So Edmund Leech is a scholar, often ignored scholar. Students don't read about him, but he is very, very important. They are not asking question, but it's very important. Any day it can come as a question and surprise you. So Edmund Leech got inspired from both structuralism and also structural functionalism and has come with his ideas, which I will be discussing in the regular class. Now, one thing that should pick you is Levi-Strauss is interested in understanding mental structure. Don't you think it sounds very upset? How did he even come up with this proposal that all humans, did you ever think? Because I mentioned it multiple times in the class. He said all humans all over the world thinks in terms of binary opposite. What inspired him? This is little tricky, not tricky, this is actually he got inspired from a group of structural linguists. Structural linguists. You may be thinking, what structural linguists? Why structural linguists? Look here. This forms the basis for other schools. This forms the basis for other schools. Huh? This is human mind. So how can we get access to human mind? Is there any, okay, now you may say Elon Musk is coming up with the idea of Neuralink. He want to put chips in the brain. That is in the present times. But in the past or even now, how can you get access to somebody else's mind without any technology? There is only one way. Language. Language is the bridge, isn't it? Language is the bridge. Language is the bridge. It is only the language that can give us access to the human mind. What human mind thinks, or how human mind organizes the world around it, we can make a sense of it only by looking at the language, trying to understand the language. So there are a group of scholars called as structural linguists who are interested in understanding the structure of the language. And they have certain proposals about which we will be discussing in the regular class. And this proposals made by structural linguists regarding to the how human mind thinks inspired Levi-Strauss, and he has copied from them the idea of binary opposition and brought it to the study of human cultures. The reason why I am bringing that into the discussion here is the same idea that language is the best way to study human cultures. Language is the best way to study human cultures. Language is the best way to get access to the human mind. Inspired another group of scholars mentioned in our syllabus called as cognitive anthropologists. Cognitive anthropologists. So if you observe that there is a linkage between structuralism and cognitive anthropology. Cognitive anthropology. Are you getting my point? Language will give us access to mind. Language will give us access to mind. So we can understand human mind, or we can understand human cognition by studying language. By studying language, we can understand human cognition, we can understand human mind. Remotely or vaguely, Levi-Strauss is doing this. This is refined and this is further made more sophisticated by cognitive anthropologists like Stephen Tyler, and Harold Conklin. And if you carefully observe during the discussion of us during these topics, I want you to take this session very, very importantly. They primarily lay emphasis on study of languages of that particular groups, because they consider that is the best way for us to understand about any culture. They put lot of emphasis on studying the languages of particular tribes or particular social group, and through this they want to understand how human mind thinks about culture and how human mind organizes culture in their minds, and on day-to-day basis how this is going to help us to interact with our culture. So that is the subject area of study which inspired cognitive anthropologists. You got my point? So cognitive anthropologists took a lead from whom? Structuralist Levi-Strauss. Then all these happening simultaneously, another school of thought came up, and this school of thought, you already know it, right? Symbolic anthropology. They have started with a premise saying that you guys are obsessed about, because at that point of time Levi-Strauss has become very popular and even cognitive anthropologists started to become popular. They said culture is not locked in the minds of the people. Don't be obsessed in so much in going to study what is happening in the minds of the people. That is very unscientific. You can never arrive at anything conclusive if you try to access what is happening in the minds of the people. Rather, if you have eyes to see, there are many symbols happening. There are many symbols which we can see. Study those symbols. So what are those symbols? Symbols could be several rituals. Symbols could be several ceremonies. Several symbolic objects. Symbols also could be language again. They also treat language as a symbol. There is so much right in front of your eyes. You can see it. You study it. You try to interpret it. This is how one more branch within symbolic anthropology is born. Interpretive anthropology. A subset of symbolic anthropology pioneered by, who is that interpretive anthropologist? Very good. Clifford Geertz, isn't it? I mentioned his name in many contexts previously also. Clifford Geertz. And who are the symbolic anthropologists which I mentioned in the last session? Victor Turner and Mary Douglas. For time being, remember Victor Turner and Mary Douglas. Victor Turner and Mary Douglas. Interpretive anthropology. So symbolic anthropology in a way has come up as a critique against the cognitive anthropologists who are obsessed in understanding what is happening in the minds of the people. So symbolic anthropologists said, don't be obsessed about what is running in the minds of the people. There are many external symbols which are visible. Try to understand them, try to study them, try to talk to people, know about their symbols, know people's interpretation of these symbols. So this is how you can better understand the cultures of people. Okay. So with all these schools happening, and from the time of cognitive anthropology, this has started. What is that? When they started trying to go in more analytical depth, and when they are trying to understand what is running in the minds of the people, means now anthropologists are talking more to the people, and trying to understand people's perspectives. Previously also they spoke to people, but very less, and they are more interested in just explaining what they have seen. But now with all this cognitive anthropology school, all these things, what has happened, and especially even the interpretive school, anthropologists started talking more to the people. Anthropologists started talking more to the people, and this kind of created an emic study. Emic means emic ethic. I used this term previously also in the class. Emic ethic. What is this? Ethic means observer's perspective. Emic means people's perspectives. Remember, while I think chapter 1.1, 2.1 students are not there. Okay, but emic perspective means understanding people's perspectives. Ethic perspectives means observer's perspectives. What is the difference? If I am observing somebody, if I give my perspective, that is ethic perspective. Emic perspectives means before coming up with any perspective, I talk to people, ask them for their perspective, that is emic perspective. That is the difference between ethic perspective and emic perspective. So with the speaking to people, all these things have come. Finally, another school of thought has come called as postmodernism. You know what this postmodernism school is obsessed about? Yes, very good. I mentioned it in multiple occasions, right? Postmodernism, starting from 2.1, in many occasions, we believed that this postmodernist school believed that knowledge is created by people who are in power. Knowledge is created by people who are in power, and all the anthropological knowledge, like the ethnography, or all the theories which have come till now, are full of bias, and they try to discredit these ethnographies, they try to discredit these theories, and they have come up with their own concepts, like I use them in religion topic also, right? Deconstruction, criticizing of the meta-narratives, all these things we'll discuss in postmodernism, but for time being, try to understand that postmodernist school, try to establish that there is a link between power and the knowledge being created, and knowledge is created by people who are in power, and they started discrediting all the knowledge which has been created by powerful people, like ethnographies written by European scholars, European anthropologists, and theories developed by European anthropologists, and said that this is not the right way to study about culture. So that is how they have ended our anthropological thought by giving about postmodernist school. So this is the transition of our anthropological thought. So this lecture is the most important among all the lectures. Even in examination, they are not asking straight questions like what is classical evolutionism, what is diffusionism. They would ask questions. The questions of the future would be like this, having that bird eye view, or having that interlinkages type of understanding between different topics, isn't it? Where did we start? We started with evolutionary anthropology, mentioned about what is their primary area. They are more interested in explaining everything in an evolutionary perspective. Later we said this has been criticized, and of course later, in as part of historicism, we have diffusionism and historical particularism, and both of this evolutionism and diffusionism criticized by Franz Boas. He came up with his own historical particularist school by criticizing the ethnocentrism in their thought process. And of course, later date, what I told, that historical particularism, and especially the studies made by Franz Boas, has inspired generation of scholars. especially his understanding that environment would determine culture. The thread is picked by several scholars like neo-evolutionist scholars, cultural ecology school. All of them got inspired from him, and of course his idea that psychology also determines the human culture is picked by culture personality school. And Franz Boas also have vehemently criticized comparative studies and has come up with historical particularism school. And later we studied that the diachronic studies are discredited by synchronic scholars of synchronic studies. And who are the scholars of synchronic studies? Functionalism and structural functionalism. And biocultural functionalist is Malinowski, structural functionalist is R.C. Brown. And later I told a school from Bayesian school called as Ruth Benedict Margaret Mead. They also got inspired from Sigmund Freud, and they has proposed this idea of culture personality school, which establishes linkages between the human personality and culture and how culture can influence personality. And within them there are some scholars like Abram Cordner, Cora Du Bois, Ralph Linton. They further revised the previous studies done by Ruth Benedict and Margaret Mead and made the culture personality school more sophisticated. Then we have neo-evolutionary school, which said it is not incorrect, it is not correct to completely ignore historical studies. They try to make some corrections in the previous studies, but they have brought back a new idea into focus that environment also will determine culture. They still believe that archaeological techniques are important to study about culture. Then culture materialism school, close related to neo-evolutionary school. They are more interested in explaining everything through a techno-economic base called as infrastructure and how it can determine structure and superstructure. Later structuralism, it's a totally new idea and proposed by somebody called as Levi-Strauss. He is more interested in understanding or explaining origins of every phenomenon, and he got inspired from a group of structural linguistic scholars, because he believed that language is the best way to get access to mind, which in turn inspired another group of anthropologists called as cognitive anthropologists, who have taken this study seriously, like Stephen Tyler, Harold Conklin, and they further developed another branch of anthropology called as cognitive anthropology. Somewhere in between comes the Edmund Leech, who picked threads from structuralism of Levi-Strauss, made some corrections in structuralism of Levi-Strauss, took idea of structural functionalism, made some corrections in structural functionalism by saying that human societies are not always stable, not always harmonious. Conflict often creates a change in the social structure from A to B, but still he also believed in the stability of social structure, but he believed the stability will be maintained through constant occurrences of conflict, and conflict stimulating a change from A to B. Then came another school called as symbolic anthropology, who said culture is not locked up in the minds of the people. For us to understand the culture properly, we have to understand the symbols, and within them there is a separate school called as interpretive archaeology, as proposed by Clifford Beach. He is interested in interpreting of the symbols. And finally anthropological thought culminated with the studies like postmodernism, who believe that all the knowledge is created by people who are in power, especially, and this has all the ethnography theories they try to discredit, and with their own methodologies like deconstruction methodology and criticism of the meta narratives likewise. Okay, so this gives us an overview of the anthropological thought. Okay, any doubts in this? Yes, please. Yes. Yes, undoubtedly. I'll talk about that. It's not in anthropology, but we use it generously. If you remember, Even the structure anti-structure debate, that also is inspired from dialectical method. I'll explain it. Even marks are also inspired from the dialectical method, that is synthesis. Thesis, antithesis combines to form synthesis, about which we will talk in the class, in the regular session. Yes. So today spend some time, an hour or so, and again go through it. Not once, twice, thrice. If you have this fundamental background in the back of the mind, then anthropological thought you can finish it off like a breeze. Okay. Otherwise, if you read each topic like a separate entity, somewhere that clarity would be missing. Why are we even reading this? Why are we reading so much? Sometimes you end up reading things which are otherwise not important for exam just because they are written in the book. So you should not lose sight of the real demand of the examination. Okay. So yes, I'll stop my session for today.